My friend Frank arrived to pick me up for our planned 4-day hunting trip. I bid farewell to my wife, Maeve, while Frank busied himself, loading our gear into his truck. As we drove toward his family's cabin, now under the care of his Uncle Bob, Frank shared updates about the place. Bob had made some improvements, including better insulation and a satellite dish for internet access. Frank casually mentioned that I could use WhatsApp to keep in touch with Maeve, but I decided to embrace the idea of being disconnected for a while. The first evening at the cabin was calm and uneventful, until something caught Frank's attention. "Oh, crap," he suddenly exclaimed, his eyes glued to his laptop screen as he scrolled with unusual intensity. I asked what was wrong, and after a brief hesitation, he turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped. Displayed on the screen was a profile on a dating site. Maeve's profile. The pictures confirmed it without a doubt. One image even featured her wearing the dress I'd given her last Christmas. Frank tried to reassure me, suggesting it might be a fake account, but the profile's details made it impossible to dismiss. The descriptions, messages, and personal touches all pointed to an undeniable truth. Maeve was leading a double life. As I delved deeper into the messages, the reality of her betrayal hit me hard. One particular conversation was like a knife to the heart. A man had written, "I've had a lot of free time this month. Do you have a place for me?" To which Maeve had replied, "Oh, yes. Let me know when I can see you again." This wasn't a fleeting affair. It was something far more deliberate and calculated. Frank urged me to stay composed, reminding me that acting impulsively could backfire. Over the next few hours, we crafted a plan. I opened a new bank account, secured important documents, and prepared for the storm that was sure to come. Frank emphasized the need for careful preparation, especially if divorce proceedings became inevitable. The following day, while Maeve was at work, I returned to our house to set up surveillance. I discreetly installed a hidden camera in the bedroom and placed a motion-sensitive trail camera in the living room. I needed undeniable proof of her infidelity. By Monday, the evidence was clear. The cameras captured everything. Her affair partner, their interactions, and the betrayal unfolding within our home. With the proof in hand, I braced myself for the confrontation. Frank, however, urged me to consult a lawyer first to ensure my rights and interests were protected. Though the experience was heartbreaking, it taught me an invaluable lesson about staying calm and strategic, even in the face of overwhelming pain. I felt the sting of betrayal deeply, but I resolved to move forward and rebuild my life. Although my lawyer specialized in family law and not criminal matters, she provided solid advice. After receiving a secure access code from her, I sent over screenshots of Maeve's incriminating profile. Frank, meanwhile, was keeping an eye on my phone. Maeve had sent a message, "Miss you, but I hope you're having fun. Happy hunting. Love you." Frank quickly typed out a reply, pretending to be me. "Haven't caught anything yet, but we're about to call it a night." Then, to my surprise, he locked my phone in his safe. "This safe blocks all signals, like a Faraday cage," Frank explained. "When you turn the phone back on, it'll look like the message was delayed because of poor reception." "You read way too many spy novels," I muttered, but I was grateful for his resourcefulness. As the evening wore on, Frank shared his own experience with divorce. He had been forced to cover the mortgage and pay spousal support for an unfaithful ex. "Hopefully, Maeve's actions will spare you that fate," he added. Taking no chances, I acted quickly. I closed shared investment accounts, updated every password, changed my contact information, and canceled joint credit cards, leaving Maeve with just one, significantly reduced in its limit. At the 6-hour mark, I checked the data from the surveillance setup. The photos confirmed Maeve's ongoing betrayal. The empty bed had been replaced with fresh linens, and some images even showed her with 2 different partners. The weight of it all was unbearable. "I need to get out of here," I groaned. Frank offered to grab a drink together, but I insisted on being alone. Reluctantly, he agreed, warning me to keep my cool. I drove aimlessly before finally parking at a supermarket. After some time, I found myself sneaking into the alley behind my own house. Peering through the curtains, I saw Maeve in bed with someone else. Before I could act on my rage, my phone buzzed. It was Frank. I looked up and spotted him waiting in his truck bed nearby. "I see you, idiot," he called out. Begrudgingly, I climbed into the truck and we drove to a nearby bar. There, Frank called Maeve from my phone, feigning concern. "Hey, Maeve. Just wanted to let you know. He had a minor accident, but he's fine," he told her. After ending the call, he reassured me. This will rattle her. She'll panic and throw her lover out. Later, as we sat in the supermarket parking lot, a man in military uniform headed toward my house. "That must be him," Frank muttered. Frank approached the man, who explained he believed Maeve was divorced. My fury boiled over, and I wanted to lash out, but Frank held me back. "Don't be stupid. You'll only make things worse," he cautioned. After the soldier left, we kept watch over the house. Not long after, another man showed up, but Maeve turned him away quickly. Watching Maeve lock the man out of the house gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. By Saturday morning, I reviewed all the footage, and there was no denying the truth of her betrayal. The evidence was overwhelming. I began preparing the photos to send to my lawyer, debating whether the videos should also be included. As I glanced out the window, I turned to Frank. "Should we go back in?" I asked. "No way," he replied firmly. "What you got from the other camera is more than enough. Let's not even bring up going inside. That wannabe soldier probably got spooked." "Maybe," I muttered as I sent the images off. Frank chuckled, but then his face darkened. "I just hope he stops flaunting himself before he runs into the wrong husband, one with an unlocked gun. Thanks for ruining my mood," I muttered dryly. Frank grinned mischievously. "Let's send Kelly her wake-up call. That'll cheer you up." I turned my phone on and immediately saw a flood of missed calls and messages from Maeve. I dialed her back. "Hey, babe, it's Matt," I said, doing my best to sound normal. "Sorry about Frank scaring you earlier. I'm okay now. I'll stay here as planned and see you tonight. Love you." After I hung up, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Kelly. "Hey, Kelly. Didn't expect to hear from you on a Saturday morning," I said. "Morning, Matt. I saw your latest package on the site," she replied. I covered the microphone and asked Frank, "Should I tell her?" He nodded. "Kelly, I'm putting you on speaker so Frank can explain why Maeve's night ended abruptly," I said. "Good morning, Kelly," Frank greeted. "Morning, Frank. What mischief have you been up to? Did my teasing about Tracy finally rub off on you?" she quipped. Frank launched into a carefully edited version of events, mentioning prank calls and texts, but conveniently skipping over the surveillance and confrontation with the soldier. When he finished, Kelly laughed. "I like that, but are you sure she's canceled her other plans?" I checked my phone and saw Maeve's latest text. "Forget the deer. Come home. I need you. I love you. Please come home now." "Told you," Frank said smugly. "Told him what?" Kelly asked. "That despite everything, she still loves him," Frank replied, leaning back confidently. Kelly's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Matt, have you ever encountered someone with nymania in your practice? You know, people with significant mental health issues?" I shook my head, unsure of where she was going. "Not personally," I admitted. She continued, "I've had clients and spouses with various disorders. It's possible Maeve might claim a diagnosis to excuse her behavior. If she does, it could affect the terms of your divorce. But don't worry. No judge is going to deny you a divorce after everything she's orchestrated." "Kelly," I interrupted, "how soon can you file the paperwork? I can't do this anymore. I can't live with her." "I understand," she said sympathetically. "We'll go over your options on Monday," Kelly said firmly. "But for now, don't tell her anything. Let me handle it." The weekend was grueling. Frank did his best to keep me busy. carefully monitoring my whiskey consumption and making sure I alternated with water or soda. We passed the time watching superhero movies, going for runs, and even spending a few hours at the shooting range. Despite his efforts, the weight of Maeve's betrayal never left my mind. By Monday, I was both physically drained and mentally determined. Maeve had played her games for far too long, seemingly reveling in her deceit. That morning, we sent her a text saying we'd be hunting all day. Her reply came quickly. You let me suffer all weekend, and you still can't give up that stupid deer to come home early? Maybe you should go to Frank's place, because I don't want to see you right away. The irony made me smirk. Staying at Frank's was precisely my plan. Once Maeve left for work, I returned to the house to retrieve my belongings. I collected everything I needed: the cameras, my phone, clothes, and valuables. Then I headed back to Frank's place. As I reviewed the surveillance footage, it showed Maeve pacing nervously, texting someone, and carefully putting things back in their places. She'd even removed photos of us together, as if erasing any trace of her actions could undo the damage. Later, at Kelly's office, we laid out the next steps. Meanwhile, Maeve's messages kept pouring in, pleading with me to come home. Kelly decided it was time to make the call. Mrs. Karras, Kelly began in a measured tone. This is Kelly DeWitt, an attorney representing your husband. He's filing for divorce. There was a pause before Maeve's trembling voice replied, Divorce? No, this isn't right. I need to talk to Matt. I'm sorry, Mrs. Karras, but he's not ready to speak with you at this time. Please contact your attorney for any further communication. Kelly replied firmly, ending the call. As the dust began to settle, Kelly gave me a reassuring smile. This isn't the end, Matt. It's just the start of something better. Her words hung in the air, offering a small glimmer of hope amid the chaos. That evening, Frank and I found ourselves at a downtown sports bar, sharing chicken wings, shrimp, and Bloody Marys. He took a sip of his drink and let out a heavy sigh. You'll bounce back faster than I did, he said. I waited too long to get help, and it only made things harder. Don't make the same mistake. It cost me too, he admitted later, his tone more reflective. For a long time, I thought therapy was just a load of psychological fluff. But in the end, I realized I was just drowning in my own mess, like a clogged toilet. You could have talked to me, I said, doing my best to overlook his unfortunate metaphor. I know you had my back, he replied, but seeing you and Move so happy only made it worse. Frank's voice wavered as he continued. After starting sessions with Kelly's therapist, he admitted that he'd begun to see my happiness with Maeve not as a painful reminder of his own failures, but as a symbol of hope, proof that love could still work. But in the end, he added bitterly, it had all turned out to be another lie. Cheers to that, he muttered darkly, lifting his glass. To hell with it all, I replied, raising mine. We clinked glasses without ceremony and drank deeply, the weight of the moment settling between us. By Tuesday afternoon, I found myself in a cramped conference room with Kelly. Papers were spread across the table in disarray, and I had taken the day off work to deal with the chaos my life had become. The previous day had been a blur, updating my work information, helping Frank search for a new apartment, and running 8 grueling miles in an attempt to clear my mind. The physical exhaustion hadn't eased my anxiety, but it had given me just enough clarity to face what was coming. Earlier that morning, Kelly had spoken with Maeve. Now, she insisted I hear her side of the story. As I stepped into the room, I braced myself for the confrontation, expecting to see Maeve and her lawyer. Instead, the room was empty except for Kelly, who greeted me with a faint smile and gestured for me to sit. Maeve wanted to explain herself. Kelly said gently, but we needed some space to sort things out first. Explain what, exactly? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady as a wave of emotions crashed over me. Kelly sighed and pushed a stack of documents across the table. She says she did it all for you. For me? I echoed, incredulous. She cheated for me? No, Kelly replied, her tone soft but steady. It wasn't about the affair. It was about the baby. The words hit me like a freight train. My chest tightened as my mind reeled. We'd been trying to conceive for nearly a year with no success. Now, Kelly explained, Maeve had sought out men who bore resemblance to me, her way of conceiving a child naturally. It was as though the air had been sucked out of the room. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She didn't want to tell you, Kelly continued carefully, because she thought it would damage your pride. You'd already drained your savings on the house, and insurance wouldn't cover the cost of fertility treatments. She convinced herself this was the only solution. I buried my face in my hands, my thoughts spiraling. It wasn't just a betrayal of her actions. It was the lies, the secrecy, the complete disregard for my trust. Maeve had decided to take matters into her own hands, believing it was for the best, believing that I couldn't handle the truth. A week later, I found myself sitting across from her in a different conference room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Maeve sat across from me, flanked by her newly hired attorney. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension as we entered a negotiation session that felt more like a battlefield. Her lawyer made a push for reconciliation, arguing that Maeve was committed to saving our marriage. But it was too late. The damage was irreversible, and my decision to proceed with the divorce was unshakable. Kelly, ever the calm and calculated advocate, was my rock throughout the ordeal. She presented the evidence with an almost surgical precision, laying out the facts so clearly that Maeve's lawyer was left with little room to argue. Kelly emphasized that if we went to court, it wouldn't end well for Maeve. Subpoenas for her affair partners, paternity tests. These were tools we didn't want to use, but were fully prepared to if it became necessary. Maeve broke down, her sobs echoing through the room. "I never wanted to hurt you," she cried. "I thought I was doing what was best for us." I looked at her, my voice trembling as I spoke. "You should have told me the truth. You should have trusted me." Her response was a weak attempt to justify her actions. It was always about us, about building the family we wanted. But the trust between us was broken beyond repair. Therapy had taught me that true healing requires closure, not clinging to something that no longer exists. The house sold quickly, marking the end of what had once been a shared dream. Maeve moved into a modest apartment in her hometown, while I settled into a quiet condo, a fresh start in a space where I could finally begin to rebuild my life. Months passed, and as I reflected on everything, I realized how much progress I had made. Therapy helped me let go of the anger and despair that had once consumed me. Maeve had sent me one final letter, filled with apologies and a faint hope for reconciliation. But I knew better than to entertain the idea of rekindling something that had already burned to ashes. Meanwhile, Kelly had become more than just my attorney. She was a steady presence through the darkest chapter of my life, offering both professional guidance and personal support. One evening, as we shared a quiet moment, she joked about how our first date had been in a stuffy conference room. If only it had been at an art gallery, she said with a small smile. It was then I realized she might have been hinting at something more. Perhaps, even after everything, there was still a chance for new beginnings.